Welcome to another garden vlog. And as you see, we got a wagon of stuff here, and I guess we'll explain what this is all for. So we are on the furthest back forested area of our property here. Of course, we're not so far away from the road. We're as you hear, we still can hear traffic and probably kids screaming when they're playing and yada yada. But on my last video, we were talking about avocados. We had a bunch of avocados in this pot particularly, and we decided to take them out and plant them around. And I broke one in there, so it may or may not come back from the roots. But I noticed when I took them out that there's an amazing amount of insects and earthworms and life in this bucket. So I've been putting coffee grounds and everything in here, and it might have actually sort of made some of the plants a little bit less sturdy. So if they were in there too long, it might have actually contributed to some rot. That might have been why that thing popped and broke when I was pulling one of the plants out. And I got a few more I want to plant that's in individual pots. And there are a lot of lizard eggs in there too. So hopefully we're going to take that and kind of feed some of these things, including that guava there that we've been trying to, I probably decreased the acidity level, by building that bed around this tropical guava. And we also got some lime for other areas. So we already seeded this a little bit with some earthworms, but there's more in there, more insects and all. So hopefully we'll put some more in here and some more where we planted those avocados, and again, add some more lime to areas that haven't had lime added. This was a post-mycorrhizal bed that I added a small avocado tree to. I'm just gonna add some lime around it. And just a sprinkle of lime around that guava again. Add some to this grapefruit tree. Avocado here that's been struggling. Let's put some here where these dwarf everbearing mulberry seedlings were planted there, and just to try to promote some earthworm activity. Another little area where we planted another avocado there. And here in this OG Toxicity Island area here, where I planted another one. Right, I think I'm going to plant this white sapote here in this OG Toxicity Island too, just to see what happens. I know these guys grow really fast, but then again, they're not known for their cold hardiness. We got plenty of shade here and trees to give it some protection, but is it going to allow it to survive, or is it still going to just die that first winter, or are we still in an area that's too wet despite having a hill here and despite having all this super black dirt? I want you to see this dirt because it's blacker than any of this dirt 5 or 6 foot away from it. Once you go downhill, it's completely different. So check out how black this dirt is. So this is that OG burning area from 40 plus years ago that people burned all in this area here. Probably a lot of stuff they weren't supposed to burn, but probably also a lot of wood, sticks, and stuff. So it's probably got a lot of fertility, I guess, in here too. I don't know. Let's see. I don't know if any earthworms are going to be in here because this is still that super acidic soil. So we might just have to continue to build it up, put more organic material in it, more lime, and seed it with, insects and earthworms ourselves. I see very little signs of activity. There's some kind of micro ants or something down there. No worms, no earwigs, nothing like that. Like Florida betony and stuff. I see like rocks, or maybe that's from a concrete block. Maybe an old carpet or rug or something there. So yeah, people have burned carpets and stuff here. So I loosely put dirt in here that I mixed with just a little bit of lime, so it's going to have it in the dirt there and around. I'm just going to get some of this good stuff here that's full of, earthworms and all that good stuff with the coffee grounds. And see, there's lizard eggs in here. So we want to try to cover any that we see here, not leave them exposed. That's probably the avocado that broke. I doubt that's going to form a new one. But we can always dig it in the ground and poured all that stuff from those avocados out to all the plants out here in the furthest back area. And I poured the rest right here on this guava here, as you can see. So that's going to seed it with more insects and earth. And I realized we got a lot of work to do to keep up with, you know, making that acidity level long term go down. We have to probably add a lot of organic material around these guys for a while. Keep them fed, keep the, you know, lime in a couple times a year maybe. Let's put some of these Jaboticabas that are doing so terrible in their pots just randomly around here in kind of shady areas, wet areas, hills, whatever. And we'll probably do this more than just on this video over time. They just did so bad. We can't donate, you know, dead and half dead plants. Look at that. Those worms just on the bottom of that pot and the roots there. So we know we're seeding this area with because worms. These plants are so small, I'm putting them right beside these other plants, you know, or otherwise they'll be stepped on, lost, mowed over. So there's that sabara and there's a white sapote side by side. Probably a bad idea if you knew for a fact these guys were going to survive and thrive. But we are in an experimental phase. Planted another one by this dwarf ever-bearing mulberry seedling. And as you can see, if you look in the distance, you're not going to know that that's anything there. And I don't have a tag for that one, but I put that cup right beside of it for now. And we might have to mark it. Well, I planted one more in the area we just were at. And then I kind of moved a little bit more upland. And we got these pine trees here. And I'm very surprised I could dig here. But I put one directly under a pine tree here. And again, as I dug, no signs of insects, no signs of earthworms. In that bucket, we just, you know, it collects rainwater and we just pour it. We use rainwater to water in everything unless we don't have rainwater. And luckily, we've had a few storms lately that is filling up our reserve buckets. Bucket there, we have a one of the North American purple sweet potatoes. I think we lost a lot of them over the winter and early spring, but we at least got one left, and it'll hopefully we can get some more starts off of it. But we need to plant that somewhere where we haven't planted sweet potatoes before, so we know that that is different than everything else we got. Well, we planted the last 4 or 5 plants off of camera. Natalie called me wanting food, so that's late. This is actually, I worked on the last video until today, and then I started working on this video, so we'll probably be working on it another day or two. But we're either setting ourselves up for massive failure or massive success. You know, I guess if we consider the Jaboticabas as something that's failing anyway, it's not a loss because it's already a loss. You know, you might could say, well, you should have just gave those Jaboticabas away to somebody else. They might have had better luck, you know, turning them around. Well, I mean, that's, you know, if I gave them to a professional that, you know, and they did it, I guess that's okay. I wanted to give them to people that don't already have access to them. You know, the seeds are so expensive, the plants are so expensive, and, you know, even I paid like $78 for all the seeds for those red hybrids and sabaras, so it's already probably a loss that's, unless they take off in the ground, and over time I figure out how to make them more happy in a pot. You know, the good news, possible good news, is I actually planted, I think, 2 avocados in wetlands on one, you know, in that panhandle area, that higher ground area, and hopefully at least one, if not both, will make it. And I planted another one right outside the area, like just on the other side of the fence. So kind of still in that wetlands on one area too. And we might end up doing more later. I think today I was thinking, well, you know, I'm working on some aged wood chip alternative beds, but they're not ready. Why add, try to do a fast bed, especially for avocados? They seem to not quite take on those fast beds as well as like established ground, and just use what I have available already. There's some hills that were made up from armadillos and trees falling, and I've sort of started doing like a post mycorrhizal on them, but I'm not starting from scratch. So I guess the biggest, loss we could take is if we lose a bunch of those avocados in ground, because we probably could have kept them alive in a pot and just gave them to somebody else. But we are keeping at least half of them probably for donating to, the garden community around here. So, I don't want to fail with 20 or 30 plants and then say, oh, well, I just ruined, everything I was intending to do. But we'll go back to some Jaboticabas. We'll do a few other things, hopefully, that I see randomly around here. Maybe some chaya or something. And definitely some Kenaf, hibiscus here, one or two more of them maybe. And try to get some cuttings from our tropical hibiscus, because some people have luck outside in certain microclimates where they come back every year. I haven't found that magic spot here. We for like 3 or 4 or 5 years had one tropical hibiscus like 30 years ago that came back until it froze down finally, and I've tried and tried again, and I've never had success more than a year or two before the plants die. But I guess it's okay. I'll keep a few in pots, try to protect them in the winter, and also use them as mother stock to get cuttings from and experiment with. We are on day 2 of this garden vlog video. Early in the morning, so I always have a cough and some congestion in the morning. But we were talking, I don't know if it was on this video or the last one, about this guabiju, and I said I need to research it again before I plant it in the ground or figure out where it needs to go. But it's pretty much a full sun plant. It likes moist but well-drained soil. It can probably handle somewhere between 10 and 15 degrees Fahrenheit cold tolerance. But it needs to be about a 3-gallon pot size before it goes in the ground. So it might be another year, maybe 2. We'll see how fast it grows before we put it in the ground. Definitely wondering when we'll be able to plant this strawberry loquat too. But I definitely am going to wait till it gets a little bit more growth and see if I need to stake it and then try to see where we can plant it in the ground. There's some kind of weird looking beetle or insect. Kind of cool looking. I think my original plans for these loquats and stuff would have been probably to use them for grafting and keep the smaller ones in pots to give away, trade, or whatever. So we'd eventually just have multi-grafted loquat trays with however many cultivars we wanted to experiment with and try out. But I don't know, that we just had so much bad luck planting or grafting onto those trees that are already in the ground. I don't know why, if it was just the sun exposure or what. Well, I've been feeling a little bit better every day, but I drank a massive amount of flavored water, which was energy drink water, probably had caffeine and other stuff in it. So throughout the day, and I didn't get to sleep till about 1 o'clock last night in the morning. And yeah, well, this 90-degree heat really hasn't bothered me too much. I know it did the other day when I was out here trying to film. I said I can't do it because I was just getting nauseous. But yesterday, I really just planting those avocados and that white sapote and the sweet potatoes and those little Jaboticaba pots in the ground and watering everything. I went from good to, like, as soon as I started bending over, digging in with the shovel, I started sweating, and you could feel it. But it actually felt good to do that. I have my, I'm nice and clean now, so I'm not sure I want to go out and dig in the dirt anymore. I'm sure Natalie has a lot of stuff for me to do today. So what can we talk about versus actually sweating and getting stinky again? This has really been the first time in a while that I haven't focused a lot of time and attention on mulberries on my vlog. So, hey, if you're getting tired of hearing about mulberries, check out this single video right here. And I sort of go back and forth on this idea of needing to back up like figs and mulberries and probably a few other things that are easily backed up or semi-easily backed up via cuttings and propagation. And yeah, we definitely, that Ronda Bordeaux fig we took 2 cuttings from and are putting it in a pot. I've just peat this time without any potting soil just to see and we're trying that with several other things now. And if we had sand, we'd be mixing sand in there. If we had perlite, we'd be mixing perlite in there. To make it more sterile, to lessen the chance of bacteria and other things just rotting everything. But the idea of backing everything up does have merit because I've had a lot of experiences planting, a number of plants, trees, shrubs, whatever, in the ground and having them die, even though they might have did well in a pot. So sometimes you got to figure out what area on your property, if any, will allow that plant to survive and thrive. Shame on me. I've probably had a few plants that did linger on for a long enough time so that I could have dug them up and moved them and tried in a different area, but I just let linger, like gummy plants and stuff that just did horrible. And yeah, hindsight is bad. Little baby anole out. That guy's like 2 inches, 2.5 inches at most. A lot of wildlife, a lot of things lately. The thing about gardening and staying outside as much as possible is you see a lot of things that you either don't see ever or not much, and we've had a few legless lizards and all, which seem to be a rarity, even though they're probably all around us. A lot of snakes, lizards, baby lizards like that, all kinds of little beetles and, all kinds of wasps and hornets and all different shapes, sizes, colors. And, yeah, it's always fun to see new things. A while back, probably a year ago, I was talking about how making raised beds, especially like these aged wood chip type beds where it's not super dense, there's all these holes and stuff in the bed, allows you to see more wildlife. And I said, well, you might be scared that you see a snake or a bunch of snakes nesting or whatever in that bed, but guess what, those snakes are all around you anyway. You just see them more frequently because it's raised in the air and you're spending more time, tending to those beds. Anyway, I'll go back to backing up things, and I'm in such a hurry sometimes just to plant these plants in the ground, but I also don't want to lose them like I've lost before. So I hope that I see some promise or progress, signs that the Ronda Bordeaux fig and stuff like that, at least one of the 2 that I put in those pots will actually root, because Ronda Bordeaux is not well known to be something considered for Florida, and so you're taking a big chance, especially in the ground versus a pot. And definitely some fig varieties don't come around as often as you may like, and unless you want to pay like a 30, 40, 50 bucks for one versus like a plug like I usually buy. And speaking of like stinging hornet-like insects, really do never know what you're going to find out here. So what's the priority now and for the next few weeks? It's probably to figure out what we can gather, set aside and say, I need to put this, whether it's 2 items or 30 items. Find a place to plant them in the ground for experimentation or for whatever purposes. I think this goes good here, or this should do well here, or this is where I want it to be, and start planting some stuff in the ground. And we haven't really did that a lot, until yesterday when we were planting, those avocados and stuff. We really don't do a lot of that on camera because we're so freaking busy and have an exhaustive life, with the kids and everything that's going on. There really doesn't seem to be a lot of time to set up a video of me carrying a shovel and a wagon and putting potting soil stuff in there. It's just sort of done. I got 2 minutes. I need to rush out here and do this without the camera or whatever. And that's usually how it happens. This sunflower pawpaw seems to be doing pretty amazing on this Tennessee avocado rootstock. It kind of sucks that the pandam there, failed to thrive after we grafted, but at least one took off. And I was expecting, all 3 to sort of survive like their rootstock, maybe shoot out some new buds here or there, or leaves. The pandam and the sunflower, but sunflower is a really good one because it flowers like crazy here. The thing that I hear is that these Swiss cheese plants, even though they're really tropical, they actually supposedly will grow on the south side of an oak tree and survive all of our cold. So maybe we need to put that to the test. That doesn't mean it's not going to get dieback. And that sure doesn't mean it's going to fruit. Most chances are it's not going to fruit unless we go to like a super tropical winter one year where it's just no frost. Definitely need to try to individually pot some of these American Persimmons that are in this little produce pack. Again, I thought I was getting potting soil a month or 2 back and would have plenty of time. But I think, the roots are already growing out the bottom, and these guys really desperately need it. Alright, so there's the first one in a little pot, and if I had, enough potting soil, I would just probably put them all in 1-gallon containers, but so I didn't really want to use my gallon pots, but I had to use 2. Look at there, there's a Suriname roach in there. Don't know if you guys seen it. There's a lot of earthworms and little insects in here because this is potting soil from last year, and it doesn't seem to have much nutrients in it, but it has a lot of like wood pieces that are fresh. But once they get 6 months age or whatever, those carbons, those organic materials in that soil that we get in bulk breaks down or starts to break down, and then all the insects come. There's a little roly-poly. Yep. So they come, the earthworms, insects, roly-polies, probably centipedes, sometimes millipedes, earwigs. Looks like springtails jumping around in there too. And, as those earthworms and stuff eat that organic material and poop it out, they poop it out, low nitrogen plant food, basically fertilizer. And pretty much most of this soil here is aged enough that it has a good level of earthworm activity. So hopefully this will make these guys happy. I was in sort of a rush to pot them because as soon as I got that first one started, my middle kid came out and hollered. Now he wants food. Mama's awake now. The oldest son was awake. So I gotta make coffee for everybody and breakfast and wash hands didn't get too much sweating in or super dirty. I mean, I got some dirt on my fingers here. Yep, American Persimmons, future rootstock. Whenever those grass fail as rootstock, then I guess we'll have American Persimmons here as well. Hopefully not 100 male trees. Well, it's been a few hours since I did any filming, and I walked in the house, did my fatherly and manly duties, I guess. I ended up reinstalling the toilet in our bathroom, putting a new seat on it. Trying, when somebody's in a wheelchair and they transfer a certain way and have to shift and all, putting so much weight on the bolts and on the structure of the floor and everything. Sometimes the wheelchair, which is almost 400 pounds, slaps into the toilet as well. It can cause issues. I mean, we've broken at least 2 toilet tanks, and we're on like our 3rd. So we're basically on our 3rd toilet and 4th toilet tank, and numerous fixes and we call them wax rings and stuff. And now we have a flange kit that on our 2nd flange kit to try to get it to be more stabilized and stuff, because the original flange was installed sideways, and the contractor installer or whatever, instead of just replacing the flange, did some kind of rigging to it that made it not hold those bolts steady, stable, and in place. So he screws sideways, angled, I should say, to hold the bolts from moving. But when there's this much weight being shifted and manipulated on the toilet, it kind of just loosens them over time. So let's just hope that we got that fixed. And then I ended up installing a magnifying light for Natalie, so that her and our oldest son can read in the mornings to do his school. So our oldest son is doing reading in the morning, and he'll do like workbook or whatever later on after he reads for 30 minutes or an hour or whatever. So hopefully that'll help with that. Yes, I can also take a little bit of time to talk about cutting propagation, and especially if we need to do sterile soil, peat moss, sand, perlite, cocoa coir, or whatever. It can be costly to just put a cutting into a 1-gallon pot. Peat, you get a big old bag of peat, but still, perlite's expensive. You will use that bag up if you're using mostly peat when you're doing gallon or 3-gallon or whatever size. And I see why kind of nurseries use something maybe like this size, or maybe even smaller, little peat pots and peat, the little plugs is what they call them. And the thing about these guys is, if I put anything in a side one, like, was this a 2x2 by maybe a 3 or 4 foot, 3 or 4 inch tall container, it's hard to keep it moist versus putting it in a gallon container where moisture is held a little bit better. So wind, drought, heat, sun, lack of rain, and those cuttings can really dry out fast. Even a lot of plants I've seen, where I've tried to just water by hand a few plants that we got in even smaller containers than this, and they just dry up and die And so it costs a lot of money if you're trying to mass produce, as I say, stuff in sterile soil in gallon containers. But the nurseries are probably doing them in greenhouses, so they're humidity controlled. They got misting or drip systems or some kind of thing to keep the soil at the proper moisture level. And I'm assuming if we keep going doing massive propagation, we're going to have to do smaller containers, and we're going to have to figure out how to keep the humidity and moisture levels up in them. Just putting them in the shade. I'm watering stuff, and we've gotten quite a bit of rain. Randomly a potted plant is still, for whatever reason, where the place it's put behind another plant, or falls down sideways, it doesn't get the moisture it needs, and we find them, sickly or dead occasionally. And we've had probably hundreds of pots here, and the smaller pots like this, they seem to, happens more frequently with. You can spray and mist or whatever with a water hose, but randomly something doesn't get enough water. And these guys right here, even though I've watered yesterday, they feel dry. They're super light, so I need to just go ahead and bottom water them or something. But I think you should, if you want to get into massive propagation, you probably do need to invest into a greenhouse or something, even if it's just a small hoop house or anything, or a lean-to from your home, just so you can control that humidity. I'm not saying it just to say it, because here is actually an example. This is an avocado. I think it was found turned sideways 2 days ago. Yeah, it's wet now. I tried to just bottom soak it, and it looks like it's just on its way out. Probably no way to fix it. There's some green there. Usually when the avocados start getting a lot of black on them, they're gone, whether it's too much water or too much drought, not enough water. They seem to like a lot of water. They just don't like to be soaked. Their root systems, they'll do the same thing when they get too much water. But this is from not getting enough water. And then here's an avocado in a slightly bigger container that was growing basically within feet of that one. And it obviously got enough water, and I still bottom watered it, so the soil looks dark and moist. But, these guys can go from healthy to, very bad looking pretty fast. And I kind of like the idea of, if I'm going to give away something, to put it in a smaller pot and, distribute it in a smaller pot, because it takes less resources to have that soil there. But I'll go back to sterile soil. This was a seed, so some people, there's a discussion, should you put seeds in sterile soil versus potting soil? And I can see both methods. I've tried them both ways. I've had pretty good successes just using regular soil. Probably would have better successes, especially with seeds that take a long time to germinate, where bacteria and other stuff could just attack those seeds and eat them before they germinate. But when it comes to actually doing cutting propagation, it sounds like most people do have better success with sterile rooting soil, which, like I said, it's more expensive. Peat is more expensive than just, your cubic yard that you buy at your local landscape place, per pound, per gallon, however you want to do it, And even if I want to distribute something like this cutting grown chaya in a gallon pot or 3 gallon pot or whatever, I want to have that maximized potential success in a smaller pot, in a sterile, soil. And so it doesn't break the bank when I have to go to bigger pots, just to give them away to people. And as I said, I buy my potting soil usually by the cubic yard. $35 now. It was $25 about 5 or 6 years ago, and it's probably going to continue to go up, but it's still not as much versus a $13 or $20 bag of peat moss, another $7 bag of sand, and $20 or $30 worth of perlite, and making some kind of mix. If you're just doing it as a really small hobby, or if money's not an issue, it probably doesn't matter. You may be buying a bag of potting mix and all that stuff, $13, $15, $20 a bag, versus going and getting a truckload at a time. However, it's not really sustainable to do it on a massive level that way. Well, we're on another day on this garden vlog. Look at that, 3 stacks of ribs there. That other one's a little bit sloped, so I'll probably have to add some more brown sugar when I flatten it out. But it's getting pretty hot. Fixing to add some barbecue sauce to it. A couple months ago we bought some, I guess it was Smithfield ribs. We did the baby backs and the St. Louis spare ribs, and Natalie really liked it. So they had another sale on a different brand, and I bought 4. And I cooked one, and she said, well, I really don't like these as much as Smithfield. So my mom's birthday was coming up soon, and she said, just cook them all. We'll keep a couple of them and give her like a big old rib roast. Look at that. Woo-wee. Natalie just asked me a few minutes ago, you got a rib for me to try? I said, no, Natalie, I haven't even put the barbecue sauce on it yet. She went from, I don't want this, just give it all to your mom, to, yeah, you got a rib for me to try? It is so muggy out here, but look at the dark gray sky out there. I wonder if we're going to get some rain today. So if you guys ever wanted to know if you could do 3 stacks of ribs on one of these little tiny grills, what is it, like 22, 24 inches at most? You can. That doesn't mean it's the easiest thing to do if you are going to just cook them here, but if you pre-cook them in a pressure cooker like an Instapot or something, 10 to 14 minutes maybe, depending on the size of the ribs, maybe a little bit less if you have baby backs. And if you do baby backs, you got to be really careful that you don't overcook them on the grill. And even these St. Louis spare ribs, you have a small end, goes like small, medium, large, medium. That small end can really overcook as well. Pretty much call my ribs candied ribs because I use a lot of brown sugar, plus my sweet baby Ray's hickory and brown sugar barbecue sauce when I get near the end. Just did my last little coating of barbecue sauce there. As you can see, it's nice and moist and glossy. And I would say when you put these guys in an Instapot, do not season them. Otherwise, the little bit of liquid and water it waters the flavors down, so it doesn't really get used. Season it, when you put it on the grill or right before, and then just work. You can put some olive oil on there if you want to hold some of the seasonings in. And all I put basically is garlic powder and paprika. No salt is necessary, just brown sugar and barbecue sauce when it's, like I said, getting that last 20-30% of the cooking, and just, if there's too much meat juices and stuff in there, that might sort of water the barbecue sauce down, so you might have to render it a little bit longer on the grill. Once it dries up a little bit, add some more barbecue sauce until it looks, like it's taking in the barbecue sauce and caramelizing it a little bit. The ultimate question is if you like it to fall off the bone or do you like it to stick to the bone. I'm one of the people that like it kind of like Ruby Tuesday-ing it, you know. They serve, you know, their baby back ribs where it'll melt in your mouth. But a lot of the critics and Natalie too likes it on the bone, so I'm trying to not Instapot it as long, but you know, the longer you pressure cook it, the more likely it is to fall off the bone. You have to sort of make those adjustments as you gain experience doing it, and hopefully you can adjust your methods over time and get better. I was out watering today, and I think I found my first American Persimmon seedling coming up right there. I don't know how many I planted, probably at least 20. So that's hopeful. You know, I've planted Jaboticabas on this vlog in the last year or two. I've planted a lot of seeds, just putting them here, there, and everywhere. And that's the first thing I've seen that actually popped up successfully. And I did cold stratify those guys for like 90 days. Or I should say that's the first tree or shrub that I've noticed. You know, I throw peas and beans and stuff out here all the time, and as you can see, that might be a squash or something there, pumpkin, and I've got some beans here that, as you can see, not really doing anything with them. Not enough to harvest. Without going back to that video where I planted those persimmons, I don't know how many other persimmons are in all of this density of weeds and stuff here. There could be a few more up here, and I might not notice for a year or two. It's been a few days since I did any recording. I was busy all day yesterday. But we have this mulberry tree that's several years old, maybe about 30 inches tall. Probably been mowed and cut down for years. It's got a good size trunk there for potential grafting later, but it is in the way. So let's pull it up since I got an extra pot with potting soil, and we'll see how well it does. We'll probably let at least part of it grow, you know, even when we graft it later, and see what kind of fruit it puts on naturally. And I just yanked it up, and it's got a pretty nice root system on it. Now, if you've been following this channel for a while, you'll know that when we yank freaking loquats up, you know, 50-60% of them die, even if we baby them in a container for whatever reason. But these guys, they might lose their leaves, but they'll come back usually. I have no concerns that this guy's going to survive. And there we have it. Well, it's been an hour or so since I've been out there in the back looking and doing that last little clip or whatever of filming. And then I went out there after we stopped rolling, and I think I found another American Persimmon, but it is kind of tall for those seedlings, so I kind of wonder if it's a root sucker off of the one that I had there for years that has two little suckers in the back that I've tried to graft, I guess at least 2, maybe 3 times onto, that were all failures. But like 20 or 30 foot away from it, we have this, what looks like a persimmon, you know, that's maybe 2 foot tall. I mean, it's possible that I just put a seed there and that was an extra vigorous grower, but I'm not sure. I guess this is a problem when you take 10 or 15 or 20% of your seeds and just spread them all over the place, because, you know, by the time I'm, you know, in a season or 2 seasons and plant 300 seeds, I have no idea where all of them are planted. However, with my wanting to experiment so much with stuff, I have no doubt that I would have put one right there in one of the wettest areas on the property just to see what happened. And that is like almost the wettest area on the property where I found. But the main reason why I went out there was to check and see if I can find out what Jaboticabas I put out there, you know. And I know I got at least 2 sabaras, possibly a red hybrid, and that's just gonna let me know how much more to gather of each to try to plant around and experiment with. When they're a certain size, they look pretty much absolutely the same, and then they get a little bit of growth on them, and then the sabar leaves, actually let me show you one that's bigger, kind of stay small. And then the red hybrid leaves, like this big one here, let's just show you side by side. So there's the leaves here on the sabar, and they're like half the girth. And this is the red hybrid. Again, let's see if I can show you guys that. It may be hard to see on camera, but looking at them side by side, these guys, these red hybrids, have way bigger leaves. But until those sabars get a certain size, they look almost exactly alike. And I guess the important reason to note that is because I've lost labels on a few of them. Just dogs, storms, probably squirrels, cats, wind, everything is just knocked them off. But now I know to not just grab everything, but to definitely put some more effort into grabbing a few of those red hybrids to put in the ground, because I know we got more sabars in the ground to experiment with than we do the red hybrids. So we want a little bit of everything in there. Remember, these guys were doing so awful in the pot, so many of them, that, I just wouldn't feel right giving away something half dead or potentially dying. So let's see if they do better in the ground, and let's see if they survive the winter. Sabars are known to be more cold hardy, but they take like 10 years plus before they fruit. Red hybrids are 2-3 years, and then they start fruiting. But you can graft them if you have mature grafting material. I think most people consider the sabars as inferior to the red hybrids and other types. So when they graft, they may use the sabars as a rootstock, as a cold hardy rootstock, and then put the red hybrids on top of them. Well, it's been another day or so since I did any filming on this video. I've just been sorting some of the Jaboticabas and some of the white sapotes, and I lost a bunch of the sapotes. Not in death, but yeah, I just lost them in some weeds, but I did find that bucket. I was like, hold on, there's only like 8 or 9 here. I know I got more than that. I think I may have had one die when I was transplanting one of the buckets into individual pots. But other than that, yeah, I'm like, this isn't right. I lost them in the overgrowth here, but I found it. And here is that bucket that I found. So I hadn't transferred these yet. I'm just gonna, I think, use these to plant here and keep the individual pots most likely to up pot and just grow out, possibly graft some in, likely give a few away to the local garden community. And if you recall, if you've been keeping up on our channel, and I say this a lot, most of our Jaboticabas did terrible, but we have one that stands out. This single plant here looks so nice. It's a little, lopsided there because it's growing in the shade. But this is the one and only that looks super good. This is a red hybrid. And this is our only sabara that looks great. Even though, a lot slower growth. It's full of leaves. It looks vibrant and healthy. So possibly those two can be donated to the local garden community. And the rest will be planted out experimentally all over the place to see if they take off or get better or just wither away and die like they're already doing anyway. This is another one that I thought I lost. Okinawa spinach. I'm like, didn't I have more than that one pot? And yes, I did. These were, I found right beside those white sapotes. So I had one I found the other day. I chopped it in half, put the tip, I don't remember if I put it in a pot or in the ground to try to get it, propagate it and get more than one. But here we go. I found them. Well, these guys are ready to chop. That guy there could probably make 2 or 3. still keep a stem, so we might can get 4, 5, 10 plants out of this guy here. And I don't know if you would recall, but we had at least 3 of these white sapotes that shot out 2 or more stems, trunks from a single seed. So these could be clones of the improved cultivars from California. Now I don't know what cultivars they are. I bought the fruit at a farm that probably had 3 or 4 cultivars or more. They send out the fruit for a couple months each year, and of course you can collect seeds. Some of them didn't have any viable seeds, some of them had 3 seeds. It's, you know, but we got, I don't know, 14, 15, not sure how many. Killed at least 1, transplanting them. Got another one that's stressed out, but most of them I think are alive, and pretty much every viable seed sprouted. I'm thinking I'm going to donate 1, if not more, of these guys here to a local nursery that has a greenhouse, and maybe they can see if this is the improved cultivar clone, because chances are people are going to plant these out, and if they don't find a proper microclimate, they're just going to die one winter. So I have those 2 big Sabara and red hybrids bottom soaking right now, and I have another red hybrid soaking. But let's just see, these are red hybrids, and if we lost the tag, we probably just kind of guessed what they were. So 1, 2, we already got 2 in the pot, so 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, plus possibly 1 to 2 in the ground. 18, 19, 20. That's between 20 and 22 red hybrids. And we know we got at least 2 Sabaras in the ground and 1 bottom soaking. So 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 30. We got a couple Jaboticabas that have no leaves on them, but they're still scratching green. So we could give or take maybe 2 of them. And we have a couple that aren't, that just died. There's no roots, no green roots, no green under the bark. You know, and like I said, we had such a bad luck, not just keeping all of them alive, but also the ones that are still alive. They just, some of them are, or a lot of them are just slowly withering away. And we planted seeds of both varieties in the ground, you know, probably a small percent, whether 5, 10%, whatever, just all over. And just like we found that persimmon or 2 persimmon seedlings, you never know, not likely, just based on planting seeds in the ground, but there's always a possibility that 1 or 2 of them are just going to show themselves, and we're going to say, wow, what is that? Oh, I planted that 3 years ago. And again, not likely, but possible. I really want to do more in this video, but I think this video is running long. It's been too many days of working on it, so hopefully in the next video we'll get some more stuff in the ground. Take care, guys.